So today we're going to talk about beauty standards and basically how beauty standards are everywhere and they often impact how we interact and are accepted in different social circles. But for the queer community, the relationships with these ideas can be even more complex. So many queer people already feel pressure to conform to gender norms, and mainstream beauty standards often reinforce those expectations. So today we'll explore the topic with our guest, Laura Verallo de Bertotto. I hope I pronounced that name right. Diving into how beauty standards impact society, especially the LGBTQ plus community. So Laura is the CEO of VMV Hypoallergenics. VMV is an internationally awarded family-owned skincare company from the Philippines, which is distributed worldwide. So VMV has published 75 clinical studies in peer-reviewed journals, making their approach to skincare research-based. Laura grew up in the Philippines and the USA, is an active member of the Entrepreneurs Organization, and in 2015 she was awarded as a PLDT SME Bossing, and in 2006 was recognized as Marie Claire's 10 Women of the World. Laura previously worked in branding in Manhattan, attended the University of California at Berkeley's Ph.D. program in ethics studies, and has a BA and MA from Brown University focusing on critical theory, race, gender, power, resistance, postcolonial studies, and postmodern culture. Whoa, that's a lot. So welcome, Laura, and thank you for guesting in my podcast. Um, so tell me more about VMV and how you got into it. Like I know it's a family business. It was set up by your mom, if I remember correctly, who is a dermatologist at Makati Medical Center, if I remember correctly too.
First off, I want to say thank you because I have to say you were such a treasure of a find to have conversations with people who really care about this stuff and are willing to explore these questions, but without kind of, sacrificing a safe space. I find so important precisely for the things that you were talking about. So I first want to say thank you very, very much for connecting and for inviting me to this, which is such an important podcast to have. But okay, so VMV, it's interesting. I had a really conflicted relationship with business for most of my life because what I studied really questioned capitalism and business and power dynamics and all those things. And then to enter business in beauty, no less. I mean, you can imagine it was like I had hives just thinking about how to market products without using language or imagery that I found offensive or problematic, right? But what really helped is that my mother is so legit about being a physician and taking that oath very seriously. We say we're here to save the world's skin, and it really means all people, all skins, all genders, all ages. And she's been crystal clear about that from the get-go. And the fact that she's been so focused about being evidence-based and research-based really helped me wrap around, okay, we're not trying to tell people how to look or what's pretty. We're talking about health. And the skin is the largest organ of the body. And people forget it's actually crucial to health because it's so linked to identity and beauty. And over time, I think I've really come to accept we have an opportunity here to reframe how we talk about skin and beauty and health. But really, it's all her and her values and her research that kind of got me there. But how I came home is my dad got sick. And I didn't know how to tell my mom, it's okay. Just call me if you need me. So I came home.
I know that there are a lot of beauty trends that happen like on a regular basis, and especially with social media, the churn of like beauty trends. First there was a dewy skin, like before it was matte skin. So like a lot of these trends, I guess like pop up all the time, and like a lot of beauty brands as well ride on that. Like, do you think those trends sort of affect you? Like BMB is it's still also a business, right? Like what is your approach to that? Like, how do you say that, okay, this does not concern health? This is just like, like aesthetics. Like, this is just like another beauty standard that we try to impose on people to like make money. So what has your approach been to like trends that come up?
So I'm going to answer that in two parts. And one is I think it really helps as a person or as a company knowing who you are really well. And so our why is to save the world's skin. And built into that means we do no harm. We're all about the kindness and the safety. Like we're your skin's safe space. Safe space is a huge thing for us in our culture, all of it. And so the idea we like to say we want to blanket the world in kindness. VMV would never come out and be like, this brand is bullshit. Don't do, and it's just not who we are. We would never do that. Also, I really believe there's room for everybody. And if you happen to be in a phase in your life where you want to be cute and try stuff, and why not, right? I mean, the fact that it might lead to a problem later, okay, weigh that in. But I was stupid in my 20s. Did I really need to drink all that much and party till 5? I mean, I don't think so, but I did. And then I got old and tired and I don't anymore. So, first, we would never kind of come out and do that. I don't do that, right? I've actually helped other brands when they've come and said, hey, Lau, we want to sell in the US. Would you look at my label and see if it's okay for the FDA? Absolutely. I'm happy to do that, right? Um, that said, when, again, we're a business, you pointed that out really, really well. When a trend comes up and talks about glow or dewy skin, we will obviously try to figure out, okay, how then can we talk about that in terms of our products, right? And so we will link it to health. We won't link it to things like when you're glowy, you're going to turn more heads or, like feel young again. I think we did that when we were a younger brand. Growing pains, right? You learn as you grow. Um, Anything that kind of has to do with your value as a human being, I think we'll try to avoid, but we will talk about the trend. And some trends are actually fantastic. So the trend finally of talking about skin barrier is long time coming and so important. So we'll talk about that, and maybe we'll try to make it cute and funny. We're a big punny brand. We'll use puns a lot just to make the science approachable, right? So we'll ride on a trend and try to talk about the scientific aspect of it or the health aspect of it without necessarily putting anyone down. And sometimes that does hurt us because of course it would be nicer to be able to say, well, that's a whole load of, horse dupe hickey, whatever. And our stuff is actually what works. It's just not who we are. And maybe if I were with another brand, I could let those claws out or whatever, but it's not who we are.
When do you draw the line when something is like purely just for aesthetics? And like when do you say that okay, like this isn't really helpful? And later I would want to like I guess like delve into more of like the beauty standards that happen, um, and how they reinforce like things that aren't even like healthy anymore.
A great, I think, tip I can share, because I think it's worked very well for us and is true to us and might help someone else who's trying to go there. Um, if you can quote the experts, it's a great way of getting the truth out there without you trying to put someone else down. So, for example, on VMV, I will often repost important news not written by us, not even from any doctor that we know, but let's say of the American Academy of Dermatology, the Philippine Dermatological Association, the FDA, and we'll share stuff like the FDA in the US has put hydroquinone as sort of a warning on a warning thing because a lot of products are using too much of it. It can be extremely irritating. A lot of products for quote whitening also include mercury, which is a toxin and a poison. We'll share that, right? And then we'll say, FYI, VMB doesn't use any of this stuff, and da 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 da. So it's a way of getting like a PSA out there that's really helpful for people without necessarily saying, oh yeah, that brand uses this, or this clinic uses that, or that one had a subpoena or whatever. We don't need to go there. We can just quote the experts.
Do you think the Philippines or like the market in the Philippines is more receptive to like research? Like, do you think we find businesses or like products that are really evidence based more interesting rather than just like the ones that hype a lot?
Of course, what I want to say is you're in media, you've written. Maria Ressa is a wonderful human being and a friend and an inspiration to me. And she's done so much work at breaking the facade of what social media algorithms do, right? So the fact that what we can, the way she puts it, I'm paraphrasing badly, but the fact that the idea of fact has been eroded so badly is to such the detriment of so much of society. And I completely agree with this, right? It's affected elections, it's affected how we look at history, how we debate with each other, and I think it's affected health. So the short answer to your question is I think that people like to think that they are very guided by science and research. I think, however, that people struggle. Even the most sincerely curious people struggle trying to figure out what that is legitimately, right? I think that there's in column A, there's still definitely a huge population all over the world, not just the Philippines, that is all about the famous celebrity and what they're wearing and what they're using. Of course, a lot of them aren't actually using the things, but they like being associated with that lifestyle, whatever. I think that is prevalent in our society. I do think there is a growing trend, especially since COVID, of people looking for honest to goodness safety and efficacy. But I do think they struggle trying to find the truth of what that is, right? That's where it gets really sticky because to understand this is hard. It's hard for people in the beauty industry unless you have a chemistry degree or understand that. It's difficult. But yeah, short answer to your question, I think it's growing.
So it's interesting that like we have a surplus of like experts and experts on social media, and it's getting harder and harder to keep track of all the current research.
You said it. Because there are also experts. There are also experts who have an agenda, huh? So you'll have some experts with legit credentials, but I was just watching something on Wired the other day. I just stumbled across it, and it was nice because she gave some tips. This expert gave some tips on how to spot like a bogus expert or a bogus source. And some of the things she said, I think are really good to watch out for if they use blanket statements like this will cure your acne, this will fix your cancer, and they don't provide, in most cases, studies have shown, but there also have been studies like this, but they don't provide the nuance of it. You probably shouldn't be listening to this person. If they try to make it sound like it's some big secret that no one else has uncovered until them, or no one wants you to know this, but did you know that actually just spreading blueberries on your skin, red flag, frickin' leave? You know what I mean? But you're right. It's getting harder and harder and harder for sure.
Even like rosemary oil, like they were saying that, like it was being used as a hair grower. And like someone unpacked that the research where it like is founded on is very slim. And like the concentration, like they only compounded, I think like, there was a particular compound from rosemary oil that was used a lot. And like they did research, obviously like this was animal testing, so it's not really applicable to humans. So that was really interesting to me. And like for me, like we always hear, this was like founded on like when they someone launches a product, for example, they say na, oh, like parang ito yung study. But like because we don't have the, I guess, like literacy or like understanding of how to read papers, that also becomes a problem, right?
Oh, child, listen, this is probably for a different podcast, but I have to share this with you because I get so kilig every time someone talks about this. Number one, most can I say most? I would argue a great many, possibly most skincare and beauty companies don't manufacture their own stuff. They outsource it. So you actually, a lot of them might not even know the nuances of what's in the bloody product, right? Like we make our own stuff on because my mom's freaking anal about, I mean, pardon me, but really focused about like, we need to know what the hell is in that raw material up until the preservative of the raw material. We need to know if it's being mixed in vats with preservatives, whatever. A lot of these brands actually don't know. We do manufacturing for other brands as well. So we know because we're also an outsourced source, right? A lot of these clinical studies and this research, there are different kinds. There's qualitative, there's quantitative, there's in vivo, there's double blind, there's in vitro. Like you said, your word is, I think, so perfect. We don't necessarily have the literacy or transparency to understand what the hell is that study. Was it just a usage test, which is not bad, but is it as valid as say a double blind evidence based in vivo study? Maybe not, right? Is it just people going, oh my gosh, there's this new cream from so and so, did you like it? Did you feel like your wrinkles disappeared by 80%? Very subjective, right? Not to be thrown out necessarily, but we don't have the context and we don't have the literacy, as you put it. Yeah, there's a lot that people don't know. It's wild.
I'm just gonna make a U-turn and go back to like the beauty standards. You mentioned wrinkles, for example. Like wrinkles are a part of aging. And obviously, like when we age, like we get wrinkles, we can try to like cure, I would say cure or like stop it, but like it's inevitable, right? It's gonna happen. So where do we draw the line on like pathologizing, I guess like some signs, and like just saying that, this is a part of me, this is a part of aging. I age because I live. So like this is not a problem. So where, I guess like for you, who someone like who works in this business, like where do you draw the line that this is actually a problem rather than this is something that we should accept?
So I think you're using such a powerful word there, pathologizing aging. There is a school of dermatology that actually considers, actually, a school of medicine, I would argue, it considers aging a disease. I've always hated the term because, especially at this age, I'm such a believer in this is how organisms are. If we're going to say that aging is a disease, it's got to be for everything, right? Not just humans. We're such an awful species as it is. Do we really want more of us on this planet that's already overcrowded, that we're not taking care of, living to 200 years old? I just, I don't, anyway, that's a whole different topic. But I think it is a shockingly complex question that you're asking. There's a wonderful book by Atul Gawande, who's a great surgeon. I believe he's I want to say ENT surgeon. He writes for the New Yorker a lot. Spectacular book called Being Mortal. And he starts the book by saying, as a human species, we have hundreds of years, if not thousands of years of traditions to help us transition into death because it is such a natural part. It's the only sure thing after being born, right? And he goes, and we've lost that. And he goes, especially in medicine, because so much of medicine has been to try to extend life. And we have stopped asking the question, until when? We just want to keep extending life. So, someone who is terminally ill, do they really want to live hooked up or with a colostomy? Like, what is it that they want? Do they really do this experimental procedure that'll give them 1 more month, 5 more days? What is it, right? Um, I think your question is linked to that in sort of a far larger scope. But in terms of skincare and aging, I know when we were a younger brand, would talk about trying to look younger longer, right? Lessening wrinkles, like rejuvenating and all these things. And I have to say, as I've gotten older and become that target market myself, I'm realizing, my gosh, all this language that pathologizes getting older, wrinkles, all of these things is really harmful because it starts to affect how we think of ourselves. I am a disease. What, I'm wrong? I have to be fixed as I get older. There is nothing here to celebrate, which is ludicrous, right? So for me, where we're trying to head is really, again, leaning more and more into things like when you get older, and you start noticing spots. You just want to make sure those spots are not dangerous and not precancerous. You see your moles starting to get a little funky, make sure to get them checked because that might be cancer. You see, other signs of aging like severe dryness, this cracking of the skin is dangerous, man, especially in the age post COVID. The cracks become welcoming for microorganisms, and you can have a fairly serious infection happen. But that's us. And I think it's lucky in a way that we're so clear, like you said, about who we are and who we want to be. In the beauty industry, I find it a finer and finer line to try to tread, to try to talk about self acceptance without hating your body or your wrinkles or your, dark spots and all this. It is difficult, very, very difficult. And then this is related. There's another nice article about, excuse me, about semaglutide that came up that was talking about the same thing. Here we are, acceptance, acceptance, acceptance. All body types are different. You can be healthy and look overweight, and let's question BMI and all this. The second semaglutide hits the market, everyone is skinny AF and talking about how, oh, I just ate right and exercise, which is not the case. And semaglutide is important medically for many people. but it's become this I want to lose 10 pounds thing, which is anyway. So, but not to go too much of a tangent, but yes, I think it's a big, big question that you're asking.
Well, it's interesting because like again like with semaglutide for example, and I feel like a lot of these quick fixes, like we like quick fixes. I guess like as a as people, like we want to like, just go to a doctor and say that okay, I want to look like 10 years younger. What surgery can I do? And like we want to get thinner. Again, like all of this talk about body acceptance, and like people say, oh, I just want to use like semaglutide or like Ozempic, inject myself and like become thin, and like not actually, I guess, like do the work, like eat better. And yeah, but also like I guess, yeah, no, I'm just gonna circle back to like beauty standards again, like like we were talking about acceptance, like about beauty, accepting who we are versus where is that line. And especially this is, I'm just reminded of like a story with a friend, like she used to join like beauty pageants, like there was a time she was explaining to me, "Oh, I'm not gonna win this beauty pageant because like may mga standards in that beauty pageant, like how they look." Like I remember telling her, I don't know if it was like bad counsel, but I was telling her, like you have to decide what parts of the game are you willing to play, and what parts of the game will you say that no, I'm not gonna play that because this is who I am. And like if it's more important for you to win like that contest, then by all means like parang do what you have to do. But at the same time, like you have to question like why those standards exist in the first place. This person is like trans, so like yun nga, like parang especially like with the trans community, like the concept of passing, like you have to look a certain way to be affirmed as a woman by society, so it's a bit stressful.
You could do a whole podcast on the topic of passing. What a history that is. For whiteness and African American communities in the United States, there's a great books, Quicksand and Passing, that talk all about that. Um, oh my God. I mean, yeah, where is the line? I think you are touching on something that I think is quite astute and maybe a healthy way of looking at it, where if you can have an awareness of it and recognize what is it I'm willing to play, which parts of the game do I recognize and accept that I'm actually contributing to a problem, and I still am going to do it because I need this. Like a lot of people who join pageants, and this I only learned in our own podcast, I'm embarrassed to say, it really never struck me as, especially in the Philippines where we're such a class stratified country, it was truthfully a one of the few honest to goodness means to s- skip a social class, if you will, to get access to verify that you would never have had a chance just by quote hard work, right? Um, so if you are, again, like Polina Poretskova, again, I think is such a fantastic resource for a lot of this stuff, talking about being considered through no quote fault or hard work of her own as one of the most beautiful faces on the planet. Should she not have used that to get money and education, financial security for her family? Of course she could have, should have, right? But is she also now really aware of, wow, potentially the role I played in how women see themselves because my face was used to market anti-aging products in a very particular way, right? So, you know, I, I'm not a fan of sort of either or very categorically, maybe just, for certain things, like don't be a Nazi. Sure. I think that's fairly categorically what it should be. But otherwise, I do think there is room for, this is my fastest way to money. I need financial security for my family, but I recognize what I'm doing. Um, I think more of the problem, and you and I were talking about this earlier a little bit, more of the problem comes from an attempt to gaslight what's happening in order to justify you doing something, right? Um, then I think it gets really dangerous for yourself and for larger systems at work.
I feel like it's extra harder for people like us, like people in the queer community, because we don't usually create these rules, right? These rules are created by cishet people, like obviously, like trans women, like trans people, like in general, like they want to conform, and for them to be accepted in a way, they have to perform a certain way, and that sort of like validates them because like you need to also have society agree that you are who you are, and it's extra hard for us because from the very start we don't really fit like very, like the mold that was created wasn't for us. And now like we try, like I guess like for me, for example, like not exactly for beauty, but for me, like how I present myself, like I feel like I have to like modulate my voice, I have to like dress a certain way, like to be accepted in the circles. Yeah. Diba? Because like you will be judged. And like even like, and then like for beauty standards, of course, like parang okay, like this is how you should look like if you want to be accepted in the circles that you want to belong to. And again, like what you were saying, na parang, di ba, na who makes these rules? And like, when do we say that enough is enough?
Oh, Evan, God damn it. I mean, you really are putting stuff on the table that's going to take 6 hours. Entire courses in college are devoted to this. So let's try to break it down a little bit. What I try to remind everybody, my children, people I work with, everybody is none of this is organic, natural, none of it. It's all societal and all historical. So what we're talking about norms to conform to are current. This is modern, Christian, gender based stuff that a lot of it came with colonialism. Many tribal cultures had a third sex for sure. Anywhere in the animal kingdom is rife with intersex, queer behavior, and biology. Like, none of this is handed down by some mystical being and cannot be questioned. This is really formed by certain power structures, history. I find comfort in that. Certainly, when I was growing up, not being considered attractive, it was helpful for me to remember that, you know what, maybe in another time and place, I might have been considered attractive. I wasn't white enough in certain circles, and I wasn't Asian enough in other circles, and I wasn't mestiza enough in the right way in the Philippines. Um, so I think there's some, maybe not comfort, but there's some perspective that we can get. Roman times, the highest form of love, or at least it was much more accepted to have homosexual love, right? There's just so many examples in history and biology. It's ludicrous to think that this is the one correct thing, period. The second thing that I want to talk about a little bit, because I think that's where a lot of what you're saying touches on powerfully, is this idea of otherization. Anytime you take a group of people, and they could be Muslim, people in the Philippines, our indigenous brethren in the Philippines, non-white people in European countries, whatever, right? Queer people in a primarily, let's say, cis hetero society. Otherization is painful because you're marked and identified for your quote difference, but all you are is who you are, you know? Like, I grew up thinking I don't know, it's just me and my body. I was like this little kid. And it wasn't until people marked me as different that it felt other. And it is a difficult space to navigate. Imagine, being queer and then also having a disability, and then also being of a religion that rejects you, or that the world rejects you, and thinks that you're terrorists or whatever. There's so much power in otherization. Um, and that, again, that's a whole college course and a half, right? But it's not not worth pursuing. I think if you're questioning yourself and your identity and wanting to fit in, these aren't bad thoughts. You're not less than, you're not weak because you're trying to fit in and not be othered. It is a normal thing to not want to be persecuted, right? We all just want to be loved and accepted for who we are. Um, so yeah, wanting to pass and wanting to be less othered, I think is a very, we just want to be safe, right? Um, I think the onus then is on, always on, the dominant group that's doing the othering to figure that shit out and stop it. Stop it. Just stop it. Right. And I think a lot of what can help there is representation. I talked about this a bit in another event where you and I sort of first met. um, it is so important to see you more and more of you in more and more places. So, young Black kids being able to see themselves on Sesame Street in their urban environment was a big deal. Latino kids, for Sesame Street to have Muppet on the autism spectrum, to talk about things like foster kids with a mother who might be struggling with addiction. These are huge things. This is freaking Sesame Street, but it is foundational and huge because you see yourself over and over. I mean, representation, I can't even talk enough about freaking Filipinos, man. We're everywhere. Everywhere. But you never really see us in international cinema, or what is the joke na ilang seasons ng Grey's Anatomy and like not a single Filipino nurse. Pero pwede ba? What is that? Um, See, and then the problem is then we see one version of ourselves on TV. And now everyone has to be that gay guy or that trans woman or that, because that's the one thing. But we're as much of a spectrum as everyone else, right? Um, so I think representation is certainly key. Um, God, you and your questions. So in terms of larger issues, like where is the line? I feel that no one can really answer that for any individual person. Are we really going to persecute people who quote sold out into whiteness or straightness or no, man, maybe they had to survive. It's I think that journey has to come. It's a very individual journey, but I do think that the onus is on people who have the privilege, who aren't being othered in that particular scenario, to figure it out and stop it and open the doors and allow more representation. Just stop that shit. Enough already. Is how I'd answer that.
But I think that also like one of the problems as well, like how we attach like a lot of these. I mean, obviously we have skin, like we have a face. Like a lot of these like exist, right? But the problem is not just because we're acknowledging the existence of our corporal form, but more of the values that we attach to those corporal forms. Like, like how youth is attached with like I guess like you're more valued, like you're more visible, like a lot of the values that we attach, and like that goes to the I guess like my point about the queer community as well. Like a lot of these like standards are supposed to affirm values. Like there are like values that are attached to like how you're supposed to look like. Um and I remember you were talking about body neutrality nga, na parang, like, it just exists. Like, maybe you can talk more about that. Like, what body neutrality is, like, how empowering it could be for us to, I guess, like, understand more about, like, just being neutral about, like, our bodies and not attach it to values.
So I don't think it's an easy ask, but I do think it is. If we're going to aspire towards anything, this is where I at least want to aspire to. Body neutrality at its core is basically the belief that how I look, the physical manifestation of who I am, is the least interesting or important thing about me, period. So it's not even body positivity like, oh, my stretch marks are tiger, warrior scars, or, you know, my acne is some sort of
A
something, I
constellation.
don't know. It is what it is, but yeah, a constellation. Fantastic. It's my own little Milky Way. Sure. But parang, I like this idea of neutrality instead, where it's just what it is. What is it? At the core, it's a group of atoms, it's energy being held together, it's a whole bunch of cells. It is literally the least interesting thing about me. You have some people, and I've heard actually doctors say this, but Laura, there is such a thing as of course, I'm a brain fog. Huh? This is coming from being sick and my age together and having COVID before. Fibonacci circle. What is it called? The circle, the proportions, the golden circle. In
Fibonacci.
all of nature. Thank you. Thank you. Fibonacci circle. Yes. In all of nature, you see it replicated. It is stunning. It is beautiful. It's symmetrical. It adheres to these ratios. Fabulous. Yes, sure. But again, the universe is so infinite. Really? That is the only standard of beauty? Is that bloody ratio and symmetry? I don't disregard it. It is stunning and it's magical that it exists everywhere, but it is really not the only thing. Um, And I do think that the other doctors I've also heard say, but Lau, certain things biologically imply things that aren't great for us evolutionarily speaking. A mate who doesn't look as strong, or won't look as fertile, or whatever the hell, or might look diseased, right? To which I say, sure, I get that. But we're also not running away from saber-toothed tigers. We're also dealing with a very old brain that still has amygdala hijacked because someone said they didn't like how I look, and now I'm depressed for 4 months. There are parts of our brain and our being human that maybe were more important before, but are less important now. And no, I don't think we need to be looking at people with skin problems and allowing our primitive brain to take over and succumb to the message that, oh, they're diseased, we should club them and throw them in the river. I would like to think that, we've evolved past that. So no, I don't see why we need to regress because somewhere in our biological evolution there was a reason for that. I think that's bonkers, right?
Yeah, like you have a point, definitely. Like we should not do that. I mean, you would think that we have evolved past that, like, like, but you see on social media, for example, like, like one of the most stinging criticisms, like when people don't have anything to argue about, they zoom in on how you look like. They zoom in on how you present themselves. And like you would think that that is like the least important part of any argument, if it is even important at all. But for some reason we still do that. And like I think I find that a bit depressing, like when we do that, because what does it matter what the person looks like? Like, listen to their argument, like, unpack, like, what their argument is, if the logic is logicking, I guess. But at the end of the day, like, you see people, like, mock how you look. I mean, this goes for both sides of the fence, like, yeah. So it's depressing, but at the same time, like, have we really evolved past it? And like, is there a way for us to, I guess, like, get beyond that?
Look, I know it's hard to get mired in the awfulness of things. And if I allowed myself, God almighty, there's so much to be depressed about now. Like the rolling back of women's rights in the United States, redlining, and just don't get me started. There's so much here locally that hurts my heart, right? Like, and and I guess we always have a choice. We have many, many choices. Luckily, you and I certainly are not without choice. So some choices can be to wallow in that misery, and maybe sometimes it's okay to. My sister likes to say, if you need to wallow, that's okay, but set a timer. So yeah, maybe we wallow in that depression a little bit. Maybe then other choices can be to fight, which can often make us miserable. Another choice can be, okay, how do I study this? This is the truth. People are currently going through this. How now do I try to learn how to engage and maybe make a change? Another choice, I won't engage, but I will participate in this discussion another way. There's many choices, right? I do not dismiss what you're saying that it is depressing. I think anyone who wants to go out there and try to make even the smallest difference in the world, you need to take a moment to lick your wounds and take care of you and cry and figure that out if you can't be there on the front lines at the moment or at all participative. But I also feel like there is hope. I mean, to be really embarrassingly blunt about it, we are not putting lepers on an
To be
island
fair,
anymore
yes.
to die. Like um, until certain social media things happened and certain elections, it was more frowned upon than it was previously to be anti-Semitic or overtly racist or overtly anti-queer or overtly sexist, misogynist. Things have changed a little bit, which is depressing, but we also did manage points of glory and hope. And so we can do it again, right? But I feel you, buddy. I mean, there's some days I really cannot. I just have to turn everything off and like lie on the grass and look at the freaking butterflies to just put me back. You know what I mean? Like refill my freaking tank because God, the evil, the awfulness, it's no joke. And I agree with you. Not only that, it goes to how you look, the insults, right? Eh, kasi ang pangit mo. Who the hell, look at her, ganyan, ganyan, ganyan. Then it goes to your sexuality, right? you freaking F word, then it goes to, especially for women, it goes rather quickly to violence. I hope you get, assaulted and da da da. Lord have mercy. I mean, uh, especially for someone, I'm sure there are survivors out there who are reading it. God Almighty, the triggering must be a constant trauma, reliving of the trauma. It is awful. So I agree with you 3000%. It is vicious and awful. And then if you find a way to, quick aside, which you can cut out later. There was a video of turned out to be Phil Am. I kept going, please let her not be Phil. Please, please, please. Of in a college yelling at protesters, pro-Palestine protesters,
Yeah,
saying, I
I
hope you
saw that
get,
video.
right? I hope you get raped and assaulted. Diba? And I was like, putang ina. And someone posted it, and I don't usually comment on these things, but I felt I kind of had to because I don't know. I think every little voice can matter, maybe make a difference. Who knows, right? Who's reading? So I posted, and I resisted every temptation to be like, I grew up also in this country, so I have tropes embedded in my brain on how to insult her that are classist or racist or lookist or whatever, diba? And all of that just wasn't there. And I also didn't want to excuse her behavior, but I basically commented saying, Filipinos as a post colonial culture, we have issues. We're colorist. We buy into white supremacy out of a desperate attempt to stop being otherized and to get out of poverty. Like we buy into that to try to associate with that power, which doesn't make this right or kind or compassionate. No one should be spewing that they want someone else to have violence, you know, meted upon them. And so I said, and I really wish every woman to always be safe and empowered and not have this. Am I proud of that statement? Yeah, right? Because I didn't go after her in all of those ways. And the response I think was surprising. It was like almost 600 comments where I think potentially, and I'm no one, I'm nobody. I'm nobody. A burp in the universe. I'm nothing. Okay. But maybe for a few 500 people, it was a different conversation to have where we could see that, okay, some of us grow up messed up because of the history of our cultures, but this was not okay. And we can stand and say it wasn't okay without attacking in these classic ways of social media. So I'm proud I participated in that conversation. Do I think it's going to change everything? No, I'm nobody again. But, diba, little things like that give me hope.
No, I agree. I mean, we always think our impact, for us to have an impact, we always think that it has to be like by the millions or by the thousands. But sometimes you just need to convince like a few people. They spread it around. Like, yeah, right.
One, one. If you meet a trans kid who is suffering because no one wants to use their pronouns correctly, and you might be the only tita or tito, especially if you look like you'd be a friend of their family who doesn't want to use that pronoun. And if you make a point of using it or apologizing when you make a mistake, that might mean something. It might not, but on the off chance that that one kindness might mean for that 5-second moment there was safety, who knows? And even if it makes no difference, you know that you put kindness out there. You did something welcoming. That matters.
As a last question, especially like I'm gonna go back to the queer community, and like acceptance is a big thing for us, right? And especially like acceptance, but mostly we talk about acceptance in the context of being accepted by society. Like as someone who works in the beauty industry, and like the beauty industry loves to talk about being inclusive, but really it's just like you market your products to a wider like market, but you don't really challenge like those beauty standards. Like how can we as a community like push back to that and say that we accept who we are, and we don't need to like subscribe to all of those like beauty standards that are being sold to us?
A very cynical answer, which is not necessarily what I believe, but if we're going to be practical, the cynical answer is get really, really successful so you cannot be ignored as a target audience. The more visible you are, the more expendable income that you have, of course the advertisers and the brands are going to talk to you because they want your money, right? At the end of the day. Another thing that I've noticed some people doing is they make their own brands. And this happened in quote, I hate this term, ethnic beauty. You have people who are like, fuck it. Like, you're not going to understand my hair. You're not going to understand, but I'll just make it. Right. And I've seen, I might be misspeaking. I apologize. I'm not an expert here, but I believe I saw one brand that was specifically positioned for trans individuals. Does it mean those products are necessarily better than other products that deal with the same hormonal issues or whatever? Maybe, maybe not, but maybe the fact that it is so clearly identified with the community feels good, right? Like, yeah, I'm going to use that shit. That's talking to me. That is my people. I get that. Um, I think those are two ways to do it. I think another is participate in conversations for sure. There was a friend of mine who actually is a phenomenal expert, wonderful professor on Black queer theory, if I'm not mistaken, especially for African American men. His name is Ed Brockenbrow, and he teaches in Pennsylvania. I forget where exactly at this point, but he posted um, a photo of a poster for an Avengers movie, and it was what's his name, Captain America, um, Chris Evans, good looking man, right? And he's full Captain America regalia. And you could tell the man has had makeup and Photoshop to chisel the bejesus out of those cheeks and those pecs and everything. And we're all in the comments going, like, he was bad looking to begin with. That man is a genetic anomaly already because he is stunning and you need to be chiseling him more on a poster. What in the hell is that supposed to do for anyone? Period. Young boys, gay men, certainly. We've all heard, like, on gay apps, like certain filters and not allowed and whatever. Like, I mean, yeah, but if we don't speak out about it, then it's just going to continue. And there are some changes that happen, and there are some brands that are very good about it. Ben and Jerry's, the ice cream company, is freaking phenomenal. Like, there can be change and there can be movement, and I think you're seeing it. You're seeing Campbell's Soup showing gay couples. You're seeing, you know, certainly when we watch commercials in the United States, there's more representation for sure of trans and queer individuals. That didn't come from nowhere. That came from everywhere, from Stonewall to Harvey Milk to all of this stuff. It didn't happen overnight, but it was consistent and it kept going and it kept going. And if we can't bring down the rock in one big bomb, the constant erosion of drips and drips and that matters. It moves things, right? So don't be quiet. Pace yourself if you need to be quiet because it's just too much for the for the moment. Get some help and take a break, but don't be silent. It all matters. Your voice really matters.
No, I like that. Like, again, we always think about change as this one huge like revolution that erupts and like suddenly like makes everything different. But sometimes it's the little things that build up. Like it snowballs into like a huge thing. And we never really realize that. We only see it like when it reaches like, I guess, peak. Like, like we see the big thing, but we don't really see like how things build up to that big thing. And we think like the big thing is the only thing that matters, but we never really see like how little things add up. Like, someone like agreeing with us, like another person agreeing with that person who agreed with us, like starting to like, we crack the door a little bit open, like wider and wider every day.
Totally. Totally. What you're doing in the stuff that you write, this podcast, all of that stuff is a big contributor. You never know who you're going to reach who's going to be like, oh, finally, someone I can talk to about this, or another place where I can talk about this, and we can maybe move the needle.
Thank you, Laura. It was really nice to talk to you, and I hope to talk to you again. Like, lots of interesting insights, and yes, catch up again soon.
Thank you. And I apologize for the verbal diarrhea. I'm telling you, you get me talking, I don't
Words for
stop.
another
Thank you,
episode.
thank you, thank you, though. I love this.
Bye.